Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening and welcome. On behalf of the Manchester Historic Association and the Majestic Theater, we thank you so much for spending a very humid August evening with us.
But it's not raining.
But it is not raining. Yay. So we thank you so much for being here and for supporting our organizations. We've been in hibernation for a little while, but we are definitely back, and we are so excited to offer you this cultural historical evening. This is actually an encore from our performance 2 years ago, backed by popular demand, hopefully even new and improved. So we hope that you will enjoy it. I'm going to give Rob the microphone, and then I'll take it back and kind of give you guys the lay of the land.
Hello. So, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you been to the Majestic Theater? Ooh, very nice. How many of you ever rented an instrument or took lessons at Ted Herbert's? Well, you got to work on that. It's always a pleasure to partner on these with the MHA. And a couple of things I would say, go to our websites. We had it was great last night. We actually welcomed back our subscribers for a big kickoff event last night to tell them about our next season, which starts October 1st. Our next season is 18 theater shows in 12 months. And that's pretty bold, and we're doing that because we are back and we are ready. So we will be doing a reveal to the public on Labor Day. If you have to like our Facebook page or our Instagram or the Twitter. Is it called the Twitter?
The Twitter, yes.
The Twitter. John, he's a Twitter fiend. John is really good at Twitter. So Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, or even just go to our website on Labor Day, and we're going to announce our next season to everyone else. And if you are looking for lessons or to rent an instrument, we do that as well. Ted Herbert's has been part of us since 2016. And you can do all that right at our Peachtree location. Or if you want to stay home and do lessons online, you can do that too. So tedherbert.com, majestictheater.net. And our actors, some of them have done this last time. They've been studying the last 2 years to learn as much as they can on this. And you're going to give them the disclaimer that these are actors. They do not know everything about these people yet. We're working it. We have to do this a third time, and then they'll know everything. But they have a great time doing these, and we appreciate your support in being here. Now, Christy's going to tell you the rules.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right. Rob did such a good job that I see a couple of my trustees in the audience, so I need to tell you that...
All right. Good evening, folks. Good evening. Chief Michael J Healey, Manchester's Chief of Police. I hope none of you like fun. Born in County Kerry, Ireland, March 3rd, 1857, I came to this country with my parents at the age of 6. We lived at 7th Street on Manchester's west side. In 1888, I was first elected a member of the police department with the rank of sergeant. 4 years later, I was chosen as Manchester's police marshal, and 4 years after that, the title was changed to chief, a position that I held for 43 years. Now, allow me, if you will, to list off my accomplishments. My first official act on becoming chief in 1896, anybody know what it was? Fired every man over the age of 50. In 1897, I banned Saturday night soirees. After all, these were indeed disgraceful affairs. In 1899, I banned singing Annie Rooney in theaters on Sundays. It was not a sacred song. It was in 1911 I ordered lighting in all the theaters as there was too much hanky-panky in the darkness. In 1912, I declared the turkey trot, the walrus wiggles, and the bunny hop dances as a menace to the morals of young people. In 1919, when Prohibition went into effect, I declared that I would make Manchester as dry as a desert. I meant every word of it. I turned my dry squad of policemen loose on the citizens of Manchester for years. Unfortunately, they in turn broke every law in the books by making arrests on the possession of booze, but we got the job done. I became nationally famous when I introduced the Healey system to control the illicit liquor problem. All saloon keepers were required to report in person at police headquarters once a month to pay a fine of $100. This resulted in a drop from over 500 to less than 100 saloons in Manchester. And I took a leading part in the New Hampshire Police Chiefs Association and the International Association of Police Chiefs. In 1922, I accepted a $2,500 bribe from the Amos-Gig Manufacturing Company during the strike. These facts were only brought out just recently. I also feel that cabarets are disseminators of social poison, so just before my death in 1937, I outlawed music in restaurants and lounges. John Clayton, who I am told is a columnist for the Manchester Union Leader, later called me Manchester's answer to Joseph Stalin. I told you.
Come on in. Camera guy, you all set? Pleasure to meet you all. I'm Alonzo Elliott, but my friends, they call me Zoe. I was born here in Manchester, New Hampshire on May 25th, 1891, and was educated at St. Paul's School in Concord, Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. I went to Yale, Cambridge University, and Columbia Law School. I also studied music privately with Nadia Boulanger and Leonard Bernstein, among many others. You all know who Leonard Bernstein is? Good. As a composer, I gained worldwide recognition for my song, There's a Long, Long Trail, that was published in 1916 and became a popular song during World War I. I wrote the music, and Stoddard King, my chief song collaborator, he wrote the lyrics when we were seniors in Yale. I created the music as an idle pursuit one day in my dorm room at Yale in 1913. King walked in, liked the music, and suggested the first line. I then sang out the second, and so the lyrics were born. Against better judgment, we performed it with trepidation before the fraternity that evening, and the tune gained attention in England and later became popular in this country. We were first published in London in 1914 because no US publisher would touch it. My love for the Merrimack River, right over here, took shape in my song Enchanted River that I composed in 1925. The exiled son of Tolstoy, the Russian novelist, heard it sung in a Russian tea room in France and had it translated into Russian. So the song was written by an American, published in England, sung by an Irish girl in a Russian tea room in France. I think that's kind of neat. Another one of my favorite compositions is the well-known march, the British Eighth. It was written in tribute to General Bernard Montgomery in the Eighth Army and was copyrighted in 1943 for publishing in 1944. It later became the Eighth Army March during World War II for British General Bernard Montgomery, and a march for the United States Military Academy in Annapolis. As a writer, I once composed an article on the background of the American Civil War song, John Brown's Body. John Brown's body lies a-moldering in his grave. It's sung to the melody that later became the melody of Battle Hymn of the Republic. The article purported to show that John Brown of the song was a soldier from Boston, not the famous abolitionist of the same name. And if that wasn't enough, I even composed a few operas. The first was El Chavite, and at the time of my death, I was this close to finishing my second opera, Billy the Kid. I can't wait for you to hear the song, She Died a Very Sudden, from Eating Plum Pudding. And as a special treat for you today, this is me, Zoe Elliott, playing a long, long trail that's right here. There's a long, long trail. Can you hear it? And this is where I am right here. You can come on up if you want. My sisters are around back. I was old. Hey. Yes.
Put into the Amistad Bank, director of numerous companies. They say I was a little less respectable, even though I managed to inherit $2 million from my father and grandfather back in the early 1900s. 23 years old, I was a New York playboy, and I was known as the $1 Million Kid. I took my $1 million and invaded Broadway and lavished it on cast members and back a couple of shows. You've heard of them, Miss Molly May, Betsy. They were flops. But I put my fortune to good use. I spent my time marrying chorus girls and actresses. I was married 4 times. Of course, that's just the ones that were on the books. There might be more, but this kind of in 1900, when I was 21 years old, I bought one of the first cars in Manchester. In 1905, I was arrested and convicted of speeding down Elm Street. For some reason, some of the most prominent citizens in town actually testified against me. I love my car so much. In 1907, I was in Boston. I was angry at a trolley car driver who had kept the lights up really high, so I parked my car on the trolley tracks and refused to move until he dimmed the lights. The police came and arrested me, and the trolley car driver came and apologized to me for causing a commotion, and then I gave him the car because I said, you know, the police are looking for it, so I don't know. In 1908, my wife and I decided we were going to go to Europe. We traveled light. It was only 17 steamer trunks between the two of us. While I was there, I got in a car accident. They reported me dead, and then the next day it turned out that was incorrect. It took a while for the news to get here, and I don't know, maybe that was part of the reason why my wife and I took separate boats back from here. So, you know, I had a nice life. And by the way, do not pay attention to any of those breach of promise suits. They were all settled out of court, completely baseless. So my dad, by the way, wanted me to let you know that this monument here, it's meant to be a five-sided kind of corner of Westminster Abbey. That's me, Byron Chin.
I have a question. Did you guys take separate boats back so that she could be with Beth?
I don't actually know why we took the separate boats back, but it was reported in the obituaries. It was funny, the obituaries after I sadly committed suicide down in Palm Beach, Florida. There were obituaries for me from Detroit to San Francisco to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. That was a very infamous boat.
Sounds like wishful thinking.
Definitely not as fun.
I am James Adams Weston. Born in 1827 in Manchester on the old Weston Place, which is the site of Memorial High School today. My education was attained in academies in Manchester and Piscataquag, where I studied engineering. Determined to become a civil engineer, I taught school during the winters, and at the age of 19, was appointed Assistant Civil Engineer of the Concord Railroad in 1846. Promoted to the position of Chief Engineer in 1849, I also performed the duties of Roadmaster and Master of Transportation of the Concord, Manchester, and Lawrence Railroads. I surveyed and superintended the construction of the Concord Waterworks, and in Manchester I was the foremost advocate for building the waterworks system. I first entered politics as the Mayor of Manchester, a position which I held on 4 separate occasions. This was quite the accomplishment, as Manchester was predominantly a Republican town at the time. In 1871, I secured the 1871 Democratic gubernatorial nomination, and after a close popular election, the legislature named me the official governor. In 1872 and 1873, I lost my re-election bids, but I was successful in winning re-election in 1874. During my 2 terms, an important railroad merger was authorized, and numerous Democratic appointments were made in the judiciary, as well as in state jobs that were previously held by the Republican Party. After completing my 2nd term as governor, I retired from political life. However, I continued to stay active, working in the banking, insurance, and railroad industries. My memory lives on with the Western Observatory in Dairyfield Park, a structure that I bequeathed money to build upon my passing. I am humbled by the text that was written after my death in 1895. One of the dearest ambitions in the heart of Mr. Weston was the desire for the prosperity of Manchester, and no man labored more zealously to secure this end than he.
Sir, I just no, yeah, there should be shade. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. That's all. Can everybody hear me if I speak at this level? Yes? Okay, then let's get started. So good evening, everyone. My name is Georgia Drake Carpenter, and I lived from 1836 to 1932. 1932. 96 years old. My family and I are very important parts of Manchester, holding many prominent jobs and roles. Did you know that I am a descendant of Sir Francis Drake, the explorer and first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe? My father was the famous Pittsfield pioneer, Colonel James Drake. My husband, Josiah Carpenter, was a successful banker and real estate owner who served as a banker in Pittsfield, New Hampshire, for over 20 years. This led us to leave many gifts to the towns of Pittsfield and Manchester that are still appreciated to this day. The Josiah Carpenter Library was erected in 1901 in time for Pittsfield's first Old Home Week. It is a neoclassic building designed by William A. Butterfield, and it was our gift to the town of Pittsfield. I grew up in the home 2 buildings to the east. My husband's brother, Charles H. Carpenter, had served as cashier in the Pittsfield Bank and subsequently made a fortune in the banking business in Manchester. Frank P. Carpenter, also one of Josiah's brothers, was Manchester's greatest philanthropist. He donated the public library in memory of his wife, as well as the Historic Association building. Following in a long family tradition of philanthropy, Josiah and I gave to the Grace Episcopal Church a stone parish house and a beautiful stained glass window in memory of our daughter, Georgia Garish, which was completed in 1913. This was on land just west of the original plot. It was designed by Cram, Goodhue, and Ferguson of Boston and matched the Gothic style of the church. My husband, Josiah, was not the only one with successful siblings. My own brother at one time was president of the Shell Oil Company. Thank you for coming.
Hey, good evening. I am Nehemiah S. Bean, and I'm credited with being the designer and builder of the Amoskeag steam fire engine. In 1847, I established a connection with the Amoskeag Company's machine shop as overseer of the pattern room. In 1850, I became superintendent of the locomotive department, a position that I held until 1854 when I moved to Lawrence, Mass. In 1858, I returned to Manchester and resumed my position at the Amoskeag. I was the first constructor of a steam fire engine in New England. You see, I was a locomotive machinist in Manchester and a member of the Hand Tub Company, my job being to work the brakes. It was then that I had the idea that there must be a better way to pump water by hand. So in the winter of 1857 and the spring of 1858, I invented a successful steam fire engine. I conceived the first idea of this invention while working at the brakes. I communicated it to Thomas Scott, a fellow workman, and after hard and patient work, we produced the first steam fire engine ever built in New England. On July 4th, 1859, Amoskeag No. 1, the first steam fire engine I designed, was put on trial, which after withstanding several very severe tests, was sold to the city of Boston for $3,500. I took out 6 patents on my invention, the second in importance relating to the pumps and boilers. I then arranged with the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company for the manufacture of these engines, and for 20 years superintended the building of some 600 fire engines. These fire engines were sold all over the world as far away as Japan and South America. After a time, my patent rights and those of the Amoskeag Corporation were finally sold to Honorable Aretas Blood, representing the Amoskeag Locomotive Works, and I retired from the active superintendence. My nephew then took my place. For rapidity in getting up and retaining steam, as well as for general excellence in other respects, the Amoskeag Bean engines enjoy a very high reputation. I'm a very large owner of real estate in Manchester and considered one of its oldest, most substantial, and most successful citizens, known to be of excellent judgment, unflagging industry, and the most thorough integrity. I'm the master of my business and I devote myself to it without reservation. Outside of business, I had little ambition and no desire for notoriety. I aspire to no political office, and I do not wish to go in the front of any political affairs of any kind. I live plainly and quietly, best known in connection with the steam fire engine, which I invented and which has contributed largely to the business, as well as the reputation of Manchester. The end.
I feel a little bit of a breeze. It feels nice, doesn't it? So you make sure you grab a piece of the breeze, bit of shade if you can find it. My name is Esther Hill Hawks, and I hope you will forgive me, but I have both my fan and some notes to help jog my memory. Just a little tip, when you return from the dead, it affects your memory. So I don't want to give you any false information. As I said, my name is Esther Hill Hawks, and I was born in Hooksett, New Hampshire on August 4th of 1833. I was the fifth child of Parmenas and Jane Hill. If you look over here, you'll see Parmenas is buried right here, and next to him is Jane, his wife. Now, as I said, my memory isn't what it used to be, so it's quite helpful to me that the top of the marker says father and mother. It's very helpful. After attending public schools, I worked as a teacher, and I want to share with you my favorite motto, which is here on my marker. On the proper training of the children rests the hope of the world. Are there any teachers amongst us today? I had a group of like 6 a little bit ago, but I assume all of you have had a teacher at one time or another. Oh, that's wonderful. So yes, teachers are wonderful, and they do a noble work. I have been committed all my life to women's rights and abolition. On October 5th of 1854, I married John Milton Hawks, who is buried here with me. He was a physician. Together we traveled to Florida, where I taught black children in a small school. Now, my husband being a physician, naturally our home was filled with medical books, so I began to read the books. And in 1855, I enrolled in the New England Female Medical College, graduating in 1857 into a profession that was still the domain of men. Is it still the domain of men? Somewhat. Men and women. Are any of you in the medical profession? Yes, yes. A man and a woman. Young ladies, take note. Science, medicine, math for women. It's all for women. When the war broke out in 1861, pop quiz. Can anyone tell me what war broke out in 1861? The Civil War. Yes, you've heard of it. You must like history. It's probably why you're here on a hot summer afternoon. When the war broke out, I applied for a position as a physician or a nurse in the Union Army. But despite my degree, I was repeatedly refused. Dorothea Dix, superintendent of Army nurses, proclaimed that at 20 I was just too young and attractive to nurse. Pardon me, I was a little older than that. It looks like I was about 28, so thank you. Still, undaunted, I volunteered in Washington hospitals until I was offered a teaching position in the Freedmen's Aid Society in 1862. In that capacity, I traveled to the Sea Islands of South Carolina, where my husband was serving as a physician. I was born to be a missionary. I zealously embraced my new role, teaching classes of hundreds of students. In early 1863, I began working as a teacher with the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, a regiment of black soldiers recruited from the Union-controlled Low Country. A few months later, I joined my husband at the newly established Hospital for People of Color in Beaufort, where I both nursed and taught my patients, including the wounded of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry after their assault on Fort Wagner. Away from the prying eyes of Washington, I utilized my medical skills and supervised the hospital during my husband's frequent absences, some of which could last as long as 3 weeks. I doubt I would have been afforded such authority had my brother not been the hospital steward, or if the patients had been white men. I continued to work in the hospitals and freedmen's schools of South Carolina and Florida throughout the remainder of the war. In March of 1865, after Charleston fell to federal forces, I joined my husband in the city. Almost immediately, I organized the Colonel Shaw Orphan House for Black Children on East Bay Street, and I began to supervise the 600 students of the normal school. After the war, my husband and I left South Carolina for Florida, where I continued my work as both a teacher and a physician. Finally, in September of 1870, I returned to the cool north to practice medicine in Lynn, Massachusetts. There I was active in various charity organizations and served as an officer of the Women's Rights Suffrage Club. Although I had been denied an official position as a surgeon, my work during the war was not forgotten. In 1899, the New Hampshire Association of Military Surgeons elected me an honorary member. In 1906, after a brief illness, I passed away at my home in Lynn. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, large.
It ought to be. I paid a lot of money for it. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. A merchant, manufacturer, and banker. I, Frank Pierce Carpenter, was born the son of David M. and Mary Perkins Carpenter in Chichester, New Hampshire in the year 1845. And I was educated in the public schools of Concord, New Hampshire. In 1864, I came to Manchester as a young man and started out my career in the grain and flour business. I then sold tea and coffee and spices. And in 1885, I became president of the Amoskeag Paper Mills and the Stark Mills. Some of you may know where those are. Years later, I would work my way up to become the president of the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company, which led me to great wealth. Manchester is my home, a place that I have great pride in, which is why I used much of my great fortune for the benefit of the city. They refer to me as Manchester's #1 citizen and the benefactor of Manchester. I held many prominent positions in the financial realm, including treasurer of the Mechanics Savings Bank, director of the Amoskeag National Bank, director of the New Hampshire Fire Insurance Company, and member of the Finance Committee, director of the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company, director of the Boston and Maine Railroad, and federal trustee of the Boston and Maine Stock. Boy, I must have been very busy back then. Well, despite my busy work and civic life, I still maintained regular attendance at the Franklin Street Congregational Church in Manchester and was president of its society. I was also chairman of the commission which erected a statue of Franklin Pierce, my namesake, in 1914. Does anyone know where that statue is today? It's located in Concord, New Hampshire, on the property of the Capitol. So next time you're at the Capitol, enjoy a visit to the statue of Franklin Pierce. Dartmouth College even awarded me an honorary degree in 1915. It has also been my belief that every city should have a library, which is why I offered to construct a public library building in the memory of my beloved wife, Eleanora Blood Carpenter, who passed on in 1910. Well, we opened the Carpenter Memorial Library on Pine Street on November 18, 1914. Has anyone ever been there? Oh, sure. It's nice to see much of the community still enjoying such a beautiful building after over 100 years.
I was also happy to give a gift of the Manchester Historic Association building located to the south of the City Library building I donated in memory of Eleonora. I also contributed to the YMCA and the YWCA buildings. My mausoleum is the biggest one in the cemetery. Well, one section of it weighed 18 tons, and it took 16 horses to draw it here from the train depot. Well, got stuck in the mud, and it took 2 city steamrollers to get her out. They got her out. Well, some said that the career of Frank Pierce Carpenter in public service was unparalleled in the state. An editorial in the local paper that day, the day after my death, ended with the following words: "It will not be hard to replace and fill his place. It will be impossible." Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Enjoy your tour.
Just a couple more. Love this. Alrighty. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Alright. My name is Betty George, and I was born here in Manchester to Thomas and Angelina George, both being immigrants from Greece. My acting and singing career began here at Central High School, where I was a member of the masked stage group. I was voted the most beautiful girl of the class of 1943. My singing career began in 1945, where I became a soloist for Glenn Gray and his Casa Loma Orchestra. This led to an illustrious career performing as a soloist with some of the world's greatest big bands, including those of Artie Shaw, Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, and Glenn Gray. In 1947, I was singing at the Coco Cabana nightclub in New York City, and the Waldorf Astoria, and the Frolics in at Miami Beach. I worked for over 16 years with the Milton Berle Repertory Company, appearing first on Broadway in 1948 in As the Girls Go and Heaven on Earth, and I recorded for Decca Records and CBS Studios. In 1953 to 1954, I entered the television world and appeared as a regular on The Jerry Lester Show, a variety program on ABC television. But I was destined to return to Broadway in Milton Berle's Repertory Company, and in 1955, I appeared in Ankles Away. I received many great honors in my career, and once was voted the possessor of the nation's most beautiful ankles. In the 1970s and 1980s, I revived my career, becoming a regular guest on a local TV show in Albany. Some of my personal friends included Carmen Miranda, Frank Sinatra, Burl Ives, Tony Bennett, Peggy Lee, Al Hurt, Buddy Hackett, Sergio Franchi, and Liberace. Walter Winchell, the famous newspaper columnist, once called me one of the 10 most beautiful women alive, and the Greek goddess of song. One music critic, Robert Dana, after hearing me sing at the Latin Quarter in New York, said, "When you hear Betty George sing, 'Let There Be Love,' you will agree there couldn't be a more influential spokesman for the subject of such great importance." I have been in my final resting place here at the beautiful Pine Grove Cemetery since 2007.
So you're going to sing for us tonight?
Row, row, row your boat. Betty George.
My name is Mary Carpenter Manning. Born in 1882, the daughter of Frank Pierce Carpenter and Eleonora Blood, and the wife of Charles B. Manning. Father always instilled in us to be good stewards of our community, and that is why I am happy to follow in his footsteps to become one of Manchester's greatest philanthropists. It is my pursuit and honor to support several nonprofit organizations in the Manchester community. Generosity is a way of life for me. Among my many civic engagements, I served as president of the Manchester Historic Association from 1947 to 1964 and treasurer of the Women's Aid Home from 1911 to 1964. Sadly, my husband, Charles, was killed in 1924 in the White Mountains in a tragic accident. He and his two brothers lost their lives when they were hit by an unscheduled train. It was winter and they were walking on the tracks to avoid the deep snow. My husband was the son of Superintendent Captain Charles H. Manning of the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company. In 1957, I donated my beautiful estate on Clark and Elm Street, called The Brook, to the Franklin Street Congregational Church. The Brookside Congregational Church was built on the property, and my home is now a part of the church complex, used as an office and meeting space to this day. Many say we could stand here today and talk for hours about the great work that I have done. People refer to me as a beautiful woman whose charity and compassion were bountiful. One of the nicest tributes ever paid to me was by my gardener, who I employed for 43 years. He once told me, "Mrs. Manning, you mind other people's business more than anyone I ever saw in my life." My daughter, Priscilla Manning Sullivan, helped carry on our philanthropic vision when she inherited the Carpenter house upon her grandfather's death in late 1938. She offered it for use by the Red Cross at the start of World War II, and that organization moved into the building in 1941. If there was ever a contest to choose the nicest person who ever lived in Manchester, many say I would win hands down.